The wrench slipped from Jake's grease-stained hands as the woman in the ivory silk blouse and burgundy pencil skirt stepped into his garage. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a boardroom and into the wrong zip code. Her heels clicked against the oil-spotted concrete, each step deliberate, measured, as if she was walking into a negotiation rather than a mechanic's shop in the industrial district of Chicago. "Are you Jake Morrison?" she asked, her voice carrying that peculiar blend of confidence and desperation that made people do unusual things. Jake wiped his hands on his coveralls and nodded, studying her with the same careful attention he gave to diagnosing engine troubles. Mid-30s, blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, eyes that held secrets and maybe a touch of sadness. She was beautiful in that untouchable way that made men like him know better than to even think about it. "That's me. Your car break down somewhere nearby?" He glanced past her shoulder, expecting to see some luxury sedan with steam pouring from under the hood. "No," she said, stepping closer. "My car is fine. I'm here because I need a favor." "A strange one." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I need a date for this weekend." 3 days. Friday evening through Sunday night. Family wedding upstate. "I'll pay you $5,000. Jake's laugh came out before he could stop it. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong kind of establishment. I fix cars, not—" "I know how this sounds," she interrupted, her cheeks flushing pink. "I'm not asking for anything inappropriate. I just need someone to pretend to be my boyfriend for the weekend. My family is complicated. My ex-fiancé will be there with his new girlfriend. My mother won't stop setting me up with insufferable men, and I just need a buffer. Someone real. Someone who won't actually want anything from me afterward." Jake set down his tools and really looked at her. There was something genuine in her desperation. Something that reminded him of the way his sister had looked when she'd begged him to go to her high school reunion to ward off her ex-boyfriend. He'd done it then for free, spent a whole Saturday pretending to be interested in people's pyramid schemes and baby photos. "Why me?" he asked. "I've been watching you for 3 weeks, she admitted, and at his alarmed expression, quickly added, not in a creepy way, "My office building is across the street. I get coffee at the shop next door every morning. I see you arrive at 7, see how you treat your customers, how you helped that elderly man with his battery for free last Tuesday, how you always have time to explain things to people who don't know anything about cars. You're kind, you're real, and you look like someone who could believably date someone like me without it being obvious it's fake." Jake ran a hand through his dark hair, leaving a small streak of grease he didn't notice. $5,000 would cover the surgery his mother needed but kept putting off because of the cost. It would cover the rent on the garage for 3 months, give him breathing room to actually build the business instead of just surviving week to week. 3 days, he said slowly. "What exactly would I have to do?" Relief flooded her features. "Act like we're in love. Hold my hand. Laugh at my jokes. Dance with me at the wedding. Defend me if my family gets too pushy. That's it. I'll pay for everything, clothes, travel, hotel. The $5,000 is just for your time. I don't even know your name," Jake pointed out. She extended her hand, and he noticed her handshake was firm, businesslike. Emma Hartwell. Something about the name tickled at his memory, but he couldn't place it. "All right, Emma Hartwell, you've got yourself a fake boyfriend, but I'm keeping my shop open until Friday afternoon. I've got customers depending on me." "Friday at 6, she agreed. "I'll pick you up here." Pack for 3 days, semi-formal attire for the wedding. "And Jake?" She paused at the door. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." After she left, Jake's assistant Danny emerged from the back office, eyes wide. "Dude, do you know who that was?" "Emma something." "Emma Hartwell, as in Hartwell Industries, as in the CEO of the 3rd largest manufacturing company in the Midwest, as in worth about $400 million. Jake's wrench clattered to the floor for the second time that day. The next 3 days passed in a blur of tune-ups and oil changes, but Jake's mind kept drifting to Friday evening. Danny had pulled up Emma's profile online. There she was in business magazines, cutting ribbons, shaking hands with politicians, giving TED Talks about sustainable manufacturing. The woman who had stood in his garage in her expensive heels was apparently something of a business legend, having taken over her father's struggling company at 28 and turned it into an empire within 5 years. Friday arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Jake closed the shop at 5:30, showered in the small bathroom in the back, and changed into the only suit he owned, bought for his cousin's funeral 3 years ago. It still fit barely. At 6 o'clock sharp, a black town car pulled up and Emma stepped out. She looked different, softer. She wore jeans, designer probably, but still jeans, and a cashmere sweater that made her look approachable, human. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, her makeup minimal. "You clean up nice," she said with a smile that seemed more genuine than the professional one from earlier in the week. "You clean down nice," he replied, and she laughed, a real laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes. The drive upstate took 2 hours, and somewhere around the hour mark, they started actually talking. Not the careful, transactional conversation of employer and employee, but real talk. Emma told him about growing up with impossible expectations, about loving her father but resenting the shadow of his legacy, about her ex-fiancé, who'd proposed only after learning she'd been promoted to CEO, about how success had somehow made her personal life a wasteland of users and social climbers. Jake told her about growing up in the same neighborhood where his shop now stood, about his father who'd taught him everything about cars before, dying of a heart attack at 52, about his mother's medical bills and his dreams of expanding the business, about how he'd learned that honest work and treating people right mattered more than getting rich. "You already are rich," Emma said softly. "Just not in money." They arrived at the estate because, of course, it was an estate, just as the sun was setting. The main house was a sprawling colonial with white columns that seemed designed to intimidate. Cars lined the circular driveway, each one worth more than Jake made in a year. "Remember," Emma said, taking his hand as they approached the door. "We've been dating for 6 months. We met when I brought my car to your shop. You asked me out 3 times before I said yes. We're serious but not talking about marriage yet. And whatever happens, whatever my family says or does, please don't leave me alone with them." The vulnerability in her voice made Jake squeeze her hand. "Hey, I'm here all weekend. You're stuck with me." The door opened before they could knock, and a woman who could only be Emma's mother appeared. Same blonde hair, same cheekbones, but with eyes that assessed Jake in 3 seconds flat and found him wanting. "Emma, darling, you're finally here. And this must be—" She paused, waiting. "Jake Morrison," he said, extending his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hartwell." "It's Ms. Hartwell Pemberton now," she corrected coolly. "4th time's the charm, they say." Her laugh was brittle. Come in. "Emma, your brother is already asking about the quarterly projections. Can't you people take a weekend off from business?" The weekend unfolded like a carefully choreographed play where Jake hadn't been given the script. Friday night was a family dinner with Emma's mother, her 3 siblings, and an array of cousins, aunts, and uncles who all seemed to have opinions about Emma's life choices. Jake found himself defending her love of her work, her decision to focus on her career, her choice to date a mechanic. "A mechanic," Uncle Richard said with barely concealed disdain. "How refreshing." "Jake owns his own business," Emma said sharply. "He employs 5 people, serves his community, and is one of the most honest men I've ever met." Not everyone measures success by the size of their portfolio. Her youngest sister, Lily, smiled at him from across the table. "I think it's romantic. Like a fairy tale. The CEO and the mechanic." "Life isn't a fairy tale, Lily," Emma's mother said, as Emma will discover when the novelty wears off. That night in the guest room they were sharing, one bed. Emma had warned him. Her mother was old-fashioned that way. Emma broke down. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I dragged you into this." "Hey," Jake said, sitting beside her on the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm getting paid $5,000 to eat fancy food and watch rich people be dramatic. I should be thanking you for the entertainment." She laughed through her tears. "They're awful, aren't they? They're your family. They love you. They just have a terrible way of showing it." He paused. "But for what it's worth, I think you're amazing. What you've built, what you've accomplished. My mom would call you a powerhouse." "Your mom sounds wonderful." "She is, tough as nails. Raised 3 kids after Dad died, worked 2 jobs, never complained. That's my model for strength, not—" He gestured vaguely at the mansion around them. Saturday was the wedding, and Jake found himself genuinely enjoying parts of it. The ceremony was beautiful, held in the gardens behind the estate. Emma cried during the vows, and Jake found himself holding her hand, not because he was supposed to, but because he wanted to. During the reception, they danced. and Emma fit against him in a way that felt surprisingly right. "Your ex is staring," Jake murmured as they swayed to some jazz standard. Let him stare. He had his chance. He chose ambition over love. Turned out I wasn't successful enough for him back then, and now I'm too successful. Can't win. His loss, Jake said and meant it. Careful, mechanic. If you're not careful, I might actually fall for you. Jake's heart did something complicated in his chest. Would that be so terrible? Emma pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. Jake, I live in a penthouse in downtown Chicago. I work 80-hour weeks. I travel constantly. My life is board meetings and investor calls and fighting with men who think I don't belong in the position I earned. You have a shop you love, a community you serve, roots planted deep. We're from different worlds. So were Romeo and Juliet, Jake said with a slight smile. They died, Jake. Okay, bad example. He pulled her closer as the song changed. What about Cinderella and Prince Charming? Fairy tale. Beauty and the Beast. She was imprisoned. You're really bad at this romantic banter thing, Jake laughed. For the rest of the reception, they played their roles perfectly. Too perfectly. Jake found himself forgetting it was an act. When Emma's ex approached to talk business, Jake smoothly intercepted, suggesting they get some air. When Emma's mother cornered her about grandchildren, Jake deflected with a story about his sister's 3 kids that had Emma's mother. Momentarily distracted, they moved through the evening like a real couple, finishing each other's sentences, sharing inside jokes that had somehow developed over 2 days. Sunday morning, Jake woke to find Emma already awake, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked, suddenly self-conscious. I was just thinking, she said quietly, about how easy this has been. Being with you. How you make everything seem simpler somehow. Emma, I know, she interrupted. I know this was just business. I know tomorrow you go back to your shop and I go back to my office, and this weekend becomes a weird story. We tell at parties. But Jake, these last 3 days, pretending to be with you, it's been the most real I've felt in years. Jake sat up, running a hand through his hair. Who says it has to be pretend? Jake, be realistic. My last relationship ended because I worked too much. The one before that ended because he wanted my money more than he wanted me. The one before that couldn't handle people thinking he was my inferior. I'm not exactly a great romantic prospect. You're human, Jake said simply. You're brilliant and funny and kind when you let yourself be. You cry at weddings, and you stood up for me against your entire family, and you actually listened when I talked about carburetor ratios, even though I know you had no idea what I was talking about. I Googled it later, she admitted with a small smile. See, that's the kind of thing that makes a person fall for you. The words were out before. Jake could stop them, hanging in the air between them like smoke. Emma's eyes widened. Jake, I'm not asking for forever, he said. I'm just asking for a real chance. Real dates. Real getting to know each other. See where it goes. Maybe it crashes and burns. Maybe your mom is right and the novelty wears off. But maybe, just maybe, it works. You're willing to risk that. Dating someone whose life is chaos? Who might have to cancel dates for emergency board meetings? Who comes with a family like mine? Emma, I spent 3 years caring for my mom through cancer. I rebuilt engines that everyone else said were totaled. I took a failing garage and turned it into something I'm proud of. I'm not afraid of complicated. I'm just afraid of missing out on something real because it's not convenient. Emma was quiet for a long moment, and Jake braced himself for rejection. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of possibility. Okay, she whispered against his lips. Real dates. Real chances. But I'm keeping the fake boyfriend fee. Consider it a signing bonus. Jake laughed, pulling her closer. Deal. But I'm using it for my mom's surgery, not some fancy investment. I wouldn't expect anything less, Emma said. That's why I'm willing to risk this. Because you're the most genuinely good person I've met in years. The ride back to Chicago felt different. They held hands in the back seat, making plans. Dinner on Tuesday, meeting Jake's family next weekend. Taking it slow but being honest about where they wanted it to go. When they pulled up to Jake's shop, Emma walked him to the door. Thank you, she said, for this weekend, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for taking a chance on a mechanic with grease under his fingernails. Best investment I ever made, Emma replied, and kissed him goodbye with a promise to call that evening. Jake watched the town car pull away, then turned to find Danny standing in the doorway. Arms crossed, grinning like a fool. Dude, Danny said, you just scored a weekend with a millionaire CEO and somehow came back actually dating her. How? Jake shrugged, heading into his shop, already thinking about the call he'd have with Emma that night, about their dinner on Tuesday, about all the possibilities that had opened up from one strange request in his garage. I just said yes, he replied, picking up his wrench and getting back to work. Sometimes that's all it takes. 3 months later, Emma would bring him to a charity gala where her ex-fiancé would try to win her back, and Jake would dance with her under crystal chandeliers, making her laugh so hard she'd snort champagne. 6 months later, Jake would propose, not with a massive diamond, but with a simple band he'd forged himself in his shop, and Emma would cry and say yes without hesitation. A year later, they'd get married in the same gardens where they'd first danced, and Emma's family would toast the mechanic who'd somehow made their daughter happier than her millions ever had. But that Sunday evening, driving back into the city with grease still under his fingernails and the memory of Emma's kiss still warm on his lips, Jake didn't know any of that yet. He just knew that sometimes the best things in life came from saying yes to the strangest requests, from taking chances on people who walked into your life unexpected and changed everything, from believing that real connection mattered more than the differences between a penthouse and a garage. Sometimes fairy tales did come true. They just looked different than the storybooks promised.